I'm Tamas Dezső, a visual artist based in Budapest. In my early 20s, I made a conscious decision to train as a photojournalist. I wanted to push through some strong inhibitions, and I figured the best way was to jump in at the deep end. The work pulled me out of the isolation that social anxiety can create, and it also promised an exciting life, travel, encounters, and a lot of learning. From the very beginning, I have been drawn to the question of identity. Early on, that meant Eastern European identity in particular. I set out to probe it in the messy, in-between years after the fall of communism in Hungary and Romania, working mostly in a fairly classic documentary mode. I then spent 5 years in Romania with my partner, who is a writer, and together we eventually made a book about the transitional era. Romania shares a similar fate with Hungary, yet it endured a far harsher dictatorship. The regime fell in 1989, but its imprint was everywhere. Still standing buildings, derelict factories, and the mental legacy you could feel in everyday life. That sense of transition brought rapid, irreversible shifts, which made the act of documenting both urgent and exciting. Looking back, I think I managed to touch a few threads of what we call an Eastern European identity. The title Everything Begins to Float, in French Tout se met à flotter, comes from my favorite book, Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea. There's a scene where the narrator stares at the roots of a chestnut tree and realizes he's just one thing among other things. The privileged human viewpoint suddenly feels irrelevant. This feeling is deeply human in its honesty, but it also lines up with what posthumanist philosophy calls flat ontology, the idea that all entities, human and non-human, living or not, share the same ontological status. No VIP row, no special seat at the table. Plants, animals, people, each matters, none outranks the others. The title points to that quiet correction of hierarchy. I think my early work and what I do now are very different, but they are tied together by a single thread, a search for identity. Somewhere along the way, philosophy moved into my life in a strong way, and it pushed me to question identity much more radically, including the idea that a non-human living being might have an identity at all, which still sounds unusual, abstract, even a bit radical. In truth, the early documentary work was a form of reality seeking, and the current, more philosophical conceptual work is also reality seeking, just by other means. It matters to me that the work keeps pace with my thinking, so with each chapter I try to do something different, more, deeper.
Tamas Dezső arbeitet mit sehr speziellen Kameratechniken. Er verwendet ein Farbfoto-Negativ und erzeugt eine stupende Schärfe. Immer wieder gibt es in den Bildern sehr spezielle Erkenntnisprozesse. Wir werfen einen Blick auf Wälder, deren innere Vorgänge wir nicht wahrnehmen können. Wir sehen Insekten, die zu klein sind, als dass sie mit freiem Auge sichtbar sind. Und auf der anderen Seite einen Meteoriten, der älter ist als alles, was auf dieser Erde existiert. Die Fotografie spielt in dieser Ausstellung die Stärke des dokumentarischen, des wissenschaftlichen Beweises aus. Und Skulpturen wie diese Leiter, die aus Teilen der ältesten Bäume der Welt zusammengebaut ist, öffnet einen poetischen, assoziativen Raum. Zu meiner Linken sieht man eine Kohlezeichnung, die Nachzeichnung einer Amplitude von Warnschreien von Vögeln, die vor einem Waldbrand warnen. Tamas Dezső ist ein Fotograf, so widersprüchlich das klingt, des Unsichtbaren. Er schafft es, mit seiner Kamera Dinge zu zeigen, die mit freiem Auge eigentlich nicht sichtbar sind. Er zeigt uns eine verborgene Welt auf der einen Seite oder eine bereits bestehende, die wir auf diese Art und Weise vorher noch nie wahrgenommen haben.
I want the images in everything begins to flow to make us notice the quiet, vegetal world right under our feet. Unnoticed is literal here. We tend to treat green as background, the scenery, the stage, where we assume the real action happens. But the plant world is more than backdrop. It's eventful in its own right. To make that visible, I worked with typical alpine places, often choosing unremarkable spots so each photograph could stand for many.
Is it always textures that you're looking for?
Yeah, and the different combination of plants. So like it has to be these small islands here. I structured the work around the 4 seasons because our shared adjustment to time links humans and plants. We both respond to the turning of the year. And over time I realized randomness wasn't enough. So I started looking for places where variety, a sense of freedom, and the sense of plant identity are easiest to read.
In situ bedeutet, dass wir zweimal pro Jahr internationale Fotokünstler einladen, einen Blick auf die Region zu werfen. Und Tamas Dezső macht es auf eine paradigmatische Art und Weise. Er macht Aufnahmen von alpinen Waldböden an der oder knapp unterhalb der Baumgrenzen. Etwas, was wir schon oft gesehen haben. Und er zeigt es aber auf eine völlig neue Art und Weise.
I'm very surprised by those colors. So I would have imagined the opposite of this kind of green would be red. Or orange.
Yeah, well, it's purple.
Uh-huh.
Almost purple. But when it's sunnier, then it goes into reddish, and then it goes to... This commission, or rather the months of preparing for the exhibition, were some of the happiest of my life. Working with my partner, Esther, it was both strange and special to spend our days watching the ignored life under our feet and to flip the usual order of things, to make what's overlooked the center, to turn almost nothing into very large prints. My aim is to gently invite the viewer to look again, with a new eye, a new orientation, a new intent, at what we usually pass by. For about 2.5 millennia, Western philosophy largely ignored plants. That neglect says less about plants than it does about us. About a human blind spot, a gap in how we think. It shows where we have been looking and where we haven't. And that, to me, is what art is for. To point, to gather attention, and to open a conversation we haven't yet learned to have.